So, welcome everybody to this week's edition of the Recruitment Reality Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Sean Allen, who is infamous. Would you say infamous, Sean, in the talent world?
Isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think it's too kind. I don't think it is, but you certainly know a lot of people, and actually a really key voice in our community and understanding, how and where the community and where talent is heading, etc. So really delighted to be joined by Sean. I'm going to do him a disservice if I do the introduction. So Sean, over to you. It'd be great to hear a bit about your background and what you're involved with at the moment, and anything else that you think is relevant, just to open up the podcast.
Cool. Thanks, Woody. Thanks for having me, first and foremost. And apologies to everyone for the cat and probably dog that will definitely join. I'm Sean Allen, head of talent acquisition at the Very Group currently. About 15 years, sort of tech recruitment experience, starting agency and then moving in-house across different companies. So I won't bore everyone with that. Also a co-founder and community manager of the Talent Community, which is about 7 months old now, actually. 8 months old.
Wow.
Now, which is a community just for all types of recruiters, whether you're agency, RPO, embedded or in-house. And then I also co-run Yorkshire Full Stack Meetup, although we're not very consistent like a lot of meetups. So if we do 3 or 4 in a year, we've overachieved. but yeah, I do that.
More of a met-up than a meetup.
Yeah. It's good. So we kind of started that during COVID, to be fair. So it's been nice to do some in-person ones. But that's me in a nutshell, I think. I don't think there's much more to that apart from the classic northerner, as you can probably tell by the accent.
Yeah, awesome. Quick question on the Talent Community. How many members is it at now?
Ooh, we got over 1,600, I think. I'm going to have a little look. Yeah, so we're over 1,600 now, which is it's grown a lot in a short period of time, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What's is there a lack of talent communities, a lack of places for people to speak that are kind of authentic in the same way that you are, or what? I guess 2 questions. Sorry. What led you to setting it up, and then secondly, why do you think so many people have started to join?
So setting it up, it sort of started with Yasser Ahmed, Steve Jacobs, James Goddard, and then they brought in myself to join them in setting it up. I think it stems from there's a lot of talent communities out there which are all fantastic. So you've got some that are just in-house specific, which are ones I've been part of before and got a lot of value from. There's agency specific ones out there, I believe. I've been out of agency too long to have been in those. But there was nothing really where it was for all talent people. So I guess we all talk about talent acquisition, candidate experience, the market, elevating everything, but we're not all talking together. So I think it's an opportunity to sort of interact a lot more from us all, from those different industry sectors, and knowledge share. So it's so that was what stemmed it. There's always that fear at the beginning that it's just going to bomb. Everyone's going to hate each other, not talk to each other, sell to each other. But it's been the opposite of that. It's just been very sort of engaging, and a lot of people interacting. And Rocco clearly has an opinion on that too, if you can hear him.
Yeah, well, he's keen.
He is.
When you sort of engage with these people, and obviously from the seat that you've been in over many years now, one thing that I sort of consistently see for in-house recruiters is that constant. You talked about elevating, the community and all of that kind of stuff. I think there's such a battle that is still going on where talent, less so now, and starting to win that battle, but the talent organization within a company has always been looked at as just a function that delivers people, not really taking that sort of segment of the business as seriously as it is, because in reality, no people, no business, no profit, no shareholders being happy, etc. And I think there's so many amazing talent professionals out there, but actually sharing knowledge and elevating themselves, etc., it is quite tough internally. So, do you think maybe the talent community is kind of helping them take that information, take it back to the boardroom, and really getting that sort of top level influence and seat that a talent organization should have within a business?
I think so. I think that's it. If you look at so many different companies, they're all going to be at different stages of their infancy, or how embedded they are and how strategically embedded they are into a business. So, this was my first head of role, for example. So I've learned a lot from just speaking to, and not just through talent community stuff like RL100, for example, and and various other groups where you're dealing with, you can speak to much more experienced people that have been through what you're maybe going through, and seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, and how to overcome it. And I think there is that piece, like you mentioned, where, I always say it's kind of two ways you look at internal talent. You've either got a reactive team or you've got a proactive team. And by that, I mean, the proactive team is truly embedded at the top. Like you mentioned, it is a strategic function, and it's looking at how we're pipelining talent in, how we're developing talent, how we overcome challenges in the market, to the more reactive, where it's, here's a new financial year, here's a load of headcount, and then you're sort of chasing your tail before you've even started. This role's budgeted from this month, but from your data historically hiring that type of role and skill set that you might need a 6-month lead time from, getting live to having that person in a seat. And then you can start to join up a lot more, can't you, around how are we looking at internal mobility and upskilling our own people? How we're reporting and looking at, well, if we don't have this person in seat at the right time, what impact is that to the business? What cost is that to the business? So I think if, you get TA to that point where it truly is ingrained at that exec level, I guess, you're going to get a lot more value from it, aren't you? To just treating it like, oh, Woody's hiring a role. Here you go, speak to Sean, he does your recruitment, and you're just kind of in that reactive cycle, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really feel for anybody in a talent role that wants the strategic influence, but has the barrier of a hiring manager just perceiving them as a CV pusher, or just an admin bod to help get people in front of them, and that really damages our industry, and it also just damages the business in the short, medium, and long term anyway. So I don't really see the point in it. But yeah, people are still resistant a lot of the time. And I think one thing that is absolutely brilliant is events like RecFest, all the IHR stuff that we do. It really is bringing these companies that have already got to that level, and helping educate people, like, how can you go through this journey quicker to achieve that. So it's a bit of a side point, really. But
there's some great people out there that have done amazing and massive scale things, and you hear it and it kind of blows your mind a little bit. You're like, crikey, they know what they're doing. But I think we're all aiming to be at that point, aren't we, if we're not there quite yet. But yeah, there's some good cases out there, and to your point, In-House Recruiter Live and RecFest and events like that, getting those people to speak and to share just really helps, doesn't it?
It does. So let's try and get some of your knowledge to the masses. Obviously, how long have you been at Very Group now? Is it like 2 years?
2 years and 2 months, mate.
Wow. That's
long time for me.
Flown by, actually.
All right.
So obviously, Very Group for the last 2 years, really sort of strange, tricky market, and you could almost split it in half with kind of what's gone on. And people would believe that the market's been so different in the 2 years, but at least from my perspective, what's been your biggest sort of challenge coming into first head of role, and obviously into a household sort of brand that's evolved from lots of other brands, and really is quite a monolithic business? What have been your sort of biggest challenges you've faced?
Yeah, I guess when I joined, there's a couple. One, try and actually look like I knew what I was doing when I started, and then quickly work out how to do what I'm supposed to be doing. It's the first one. The second one was really understanding the industry, because I'd always been a tech recruiter by trade, and I'd worked in different industries. I've always focused on tech, so you do have that sort of siloed view, I guess, on a market of it. Whereas obviously I was looking, you're looking after everything from your customer care to retail to our financial services teams to all your head office roles to your fulfillment center. So that was massively eye-opening. I'd say sort of the retail fulfillment bits, and then actually just the customer care market. I know it's one of those where when you've had those teams in the past, you'd help out, when it was at that peak hiring, and you'd get your scripts and help out with screening calls or whatever back in the day before Willow existed. But it's good, that, wasn't it?
Thanks for the segue, Sean. Appreciate it.
No, oh, you're welcome. But yeah, so it's really understanding all those different markets and trying to remove myself from the one that I've always known, which is your sort of comfort blanket, isn't it? And really get ingrained and understands the wider business piece, how it works, what the market's like. So that's been a learning curve. But then at the same time, my view is get the right recruiters in. They're the SMEs in their areas, right? And then I can learn as much as I need to learn, but try and focus on making sure they've got the tools and environment to do their job, really. But yeah, it's been a learning curve, new industry, a bigger role and remit. So
awesome.
Take it day by day.
That's why you're 2 years in, and hopefully, touch wood, not bored yet, because of the, you have literally been tech recruiter world, or etc., and moved into something that is so broad and different. Does that keep you more interested?
It does, yeah. It's because you're getting different challenges coming up, aren't you? I think you get a bit cyclical with certain things when you're just looking at the same thing. So for us, it's really interesting when, like now you're sort of ramping up for peak. So, your retail recruitment, your fulfillment recruitment, your customer care teams are all sort of ramping up. So you've got to make sure you're getting the right people in, at the right time, to be able to support the business, support our customers with that. Whereas I think historically, when I've been in places, because it's just pure tech, after a couple of years, you probably, you want to move just to go to a different company, just to give yourself a bit of variation in terms of seeing how things are done somewhere else, and maybe a different industry, but you're still working on the same sort of stuff. So it's definitely broad. Probably took me a year just to kind of understand and just see that 1 year cycle, if that makes sense, to try and get my head around it, to be fair.
What's your favourite section of roles to work on? Like, because the sort of warehouse stuff, that's just mega high volume, process led, etc., right the way through to hiring for corporate HQ or whatever, which is totally different altogether. Now that you've seen all of those types of roles, like where's your favourite thing to focus on?
Ooh, I can't say I have a favourite, can I? Because then I'll upset.
No, it's just like having a favourite child, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I've always got a soft spot for the tech side of things, haven't I? Because of what I've done. So you think you spent so long doing something, you always have it. I think at the moment I really enjoy. Well, actually, one I do really enjoy is sort of ESG side, so the sustainability stuff. So when that comes up, that's just fascinating, and that's just really interesting seeing what they're doing. I think from a current challenge perspective, customer care is really interesting. So you are bringing in some volume, and I guess our volume isn't going to be like volume if you're working at Royal Mail or something, where it's just let me cry thinking about the numbers they must hire. But just in terms of those bulk sort of intakes, and that's just a really interesting sort of market in terms of its own challenges, in that you're bringing people in at a certain salary level where if they get £500 or £1,000 a year more somewhere else, that's a big chunk of change that can help cover more bills for them when we're in a cost of living sort of scenario. So it's interesting from that perspective, but also just that the demand is there for everyone at similar times, so it makes it quite a competitive and interesting sort of time to go to market. Just dealing with those numbers and trying to get the conversions, right, that you're after.
Yeah. Well, and I guess totally different world to tech recruitment.
Yeah,
In the
completely different. Yeah, yeah. But
different
sometimes you
skill
have similar
set.
challenges, though, right? You
Mm.
know, I think what's opened my eyes is that you can have similar challenges. You can do similar things, but obviously with the twist on them. But, you know, if you talk about employer brand, for example, you know, you need that across all your areas. So if you're not investing in your employer brand in an area, you're probably going to see an impact because of that. Or, you know, like we saw in tech, no one really wants to do tech tests. So you're moving to pair programming or trying to do, you know, one-to-ones with whiteboard exercises and
Mm.
looking at someone's thought process. And it's kind of similar with customer care. It's like, you know, we're trying to hire numbers, but do assessment centers still really work? Do people want to show up for them? You know, are we better off doing, you know, more remote interviews, or is it the value in trying to get on site, but it's still that sort of one-to-one thing rather than assessment?
Yeah.
So, you know, even that's quite interesting, just looking at the different conversion rates that you get depending what you know, what you look to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's fascinating about like customer care and needing to do assessment centres is if you think about somebody's willing to move for 75 pence extra an hour, which is a lot of money over the year, but actually not a huge difference in their hourly rate, right?
Yeah.
And then you're asking them to come in for assessment centres, pay for travel, all of that stuff. It really does make you think, okay, well, how am I going to encourage this person to take less hours at their current place so they can come in and do a face-to-face interview here, for example?
Yeah, and then you're in holiday season now, aren't you? So you're trying to,
Yeah,
you
which is
know,
just a nightmare.
hire during holiday season, which is always fun for anyone. That's recruiting, right?
Yeah, well, same as selling, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So literally, when a renewal comes up and you're like, okay, this renewal is due in August, we need to get it signed by March because there's no chance we'll be so low on their agenda they won't know what's going on because the holidays, and then one person will sign it off and they'll be like, oh, I'm not the one to sign it. But so yeah, I feel your pain for sure. You obviously touched on employer branding. I'm always really intrigued to sort of understand your sort of ethos around employer branding and kind of how you get it out there and I guess what tips you've got. Obviously, having come into a big brand and first year is kind of learning, getting your feet under the table. What focus have you put on employer branding and kind of what things have you done?
Yeah, we've kind of phased it a little bit. So when I joined, it'll be what, June 21? We're in 23. Yeah, that's about 2 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think if I remember rightly, that was the time we were all sort of coming out of COVID, but not everyone was sort of like on site, you know. So I remember
yeah,
first few weeks when I was popping in to meet people and see the office, it was a lot quieter then than it is now. But as we were coming out of that, and when I joined, we had a lot of tech vacancies on, and I had a view of. I remember sitting in a meeting with our CIO and his leadership team and head of people and our head of academies and stuff, and I was a bit like, I've never really come across various of tech brands, you know, even when I've hired and recruited in the Northwest in Manchester on and off over the years when I was a tech recruiter. So the first bit there really was trying to understand what our brand was and sort of tell that story because we're going on a big tech transformation. When I joined as well, we're probably about maybe a year into that. But obviously the market had opened up massively, hadn't it? So when you're lifting, it's like you've got some London companies offering fully remote and, you know, other companies want to get back to hybrid or we're still remote. So, you know, the talent pool had opened up, which you look is, oh, that's great. That's opened up for us. But then you also go, oh, hang on a minute. It's opened up for us, but it has for everyone else, right? So there's you know, we're definitely going to get targeted too. So that was the first thing we did really was look at sort of telling that tech journey, so people in the tech community could understand what we're doing and what journey we're on, and you know, and the hope then that people either want to come and join you on that journey at that point, or may see that and go, actually, in 2 years or 3 years, it's going to be at the point where I'd maybe want to relook at it and join. So that was the first thing that we did was look at the employer brand behind sort of tech data and products. And a lot of that involved engaging external partners so we could tap into broader talent pools. So HackerJob, for example, we did a lot of brand content with them, still do stuff with them. partnered with, Chic and Code. We ended up partnering with Manchester Digital. Granted, we're sort of Liverpool, but, to be in that Northwest tech scene, and started creating lots of different content, both in-house and with those parties, and getting a bit of employee advocacy, as well. And, even working with partners like AWS, for partnering with them, there's opportunities to do stuff with them as well. So it's really just exploring the options that we had available or could get available to us. So that was the first or sort of big piece that we did. And we've certainly seen progress with that. The current one now is on the customer care side, and trying to do more branding content around customer care, and being able to talk about the different teams, what the different teams do, what a career looks like, some of those career journeys that people have had within that department or wider within Berry. So that's kind of the next big one that we're sort of kickstarting at the moment.
Firstly, when we had a bit of a, the sort of tech blip, if you like, where we'd had a record amount of investment in 2021 into technology businesses, and then all of a sudden 2022 comes and everybody's like, oh, we should be doing this. I don't think these companies are recklessly spending their money and just hiring people for the sake of it. And a lot of tech people got displaced by that. But the message was always, there are companies like the Very Group who are, old companies that are going through a transition to be more tech enabled. And that's actually an amazing, really exciting opportunity. And also within a stable, great business. So
Yeah,
I don't know. Did that have an impact? Did you see any positive impact from that side of things first?
so, yeah. I mean, it's been weird, hasn't it? I don't think there's been a normal market since before COVID, if we could call markets normal then. Everything seems to be one extreme to the other, doesn't it? With unfortunately people being the ones affected. But we've definitely seen, where some companies have unfortunately had to, reduce their headcount numbers. We have hired from people from those companies, not through a specific, we're really sorry to hear about your news, but hey, we've got all these vacancies, posts that you see all the time, but more from just if we're doing our brand content right and we're sourcing right, we'll catch those people. And again, I think employee advocacy and tapping into their networks goes a long way, doesn't it? As well as pushing your own brand. But the one of the best examples, I think, because I always say, because I'm no employee brand expert, right? But I always say it's one of those things that's truly hard to measure ROI to try and get it really down to an exact amount. But if you turn it off, you'll notice, kind of thing.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I think one of the best ones we had was we ran a career returners program in tech for the first time 2 years ago, and then we were running a second cohort last year because the first one was really successful. And we did a podcast that was with one of our career returners and our head of academies at the time, just talking about that scheme and what her journey's been like, from when she'd had a career break and coming back. And we actually had someone apply who luckily was successful and luckily did accept our offer to join, who applied just off here in the back of that podcast, right? So wow. There is a lot of strength to, I think, that authenticity and telling the story and the journey you're on. I don't believe you should be over-egging or overselling things, because no company's perfect. But I think that's the point, isn't it? If you're being authentic about what you're doing and where you are as a company and the journey you're on, people will want to join that or not. And, the ones that do want to join it are probably the people that are right for your company at that time as well. So it's, there has been a lot of success from it. Which has been nice to see. But that's my favourite example for sure. It's quite a heartwarming one. I'm soft at heart.
Yeah. So. That's awesome. Well, and you can turn around and say, hey, that's why we did that podcast, by the way.
Well, exactly. I can do that as well, yeah. Look like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's good for budgeting. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's funny, the power of a brand is difficult to measure, but whether it's in sales, whether it's in recruitment, whether it's in, the trust of your brand, whatever, as soon as your brand is inauthentic or damaged, you will notice it. You'll see the negatives a lot quicker than you kind of appreciate the positives.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah, I
So,
agree.
switching to the kind of the next stage of the process, then you obviously touched on like you internally assessing how you interview, how you assess talent, all of that kind of stuff. In terms of like traditional hiring, I guess processes like job board, CV application, telephone interview, face-to-face interview with the recruiter or HR or the hiring manager, presentation,
Yeah.
hire. How fit for purpose do you still think that is in the modern world? And if it isn't, like, how have you started to adapt your processes?
I think it's that's a loaded question, that isn't it, Woody? I think
Can you
there's
tell?
yeah, no, it's a really good one. I think when it comes to interview process, ours are always going to differ depending on the role and the area. So I guess for us, it's all about having as much flexibility as possible. Ultimately, the first and foremost, the interview is for somebody to give the best account of themselves, isn't it? So we want to encourage and support that. So it will always differ. And I think we're trying to use more and more data and feedback to help inform where we can, change and improve things. I think as a talent team, we push back if a hiring manager has a process we just don't agree is right for what for what the role is. You don't want 3 or 4 stages if you're not going to be joining the exec, do you? So we try to keep it as streamlined as possible. But I mean, off the back of that, we've started advertising our interview process on every advert. So when someone does apply, we're trying to be transparent with how many stages that is and what it will entail. So if they don't want to do it, then we're not wasting their time, right, in applying, or at the same time, opportunity to ask if there's flexibility around things. As well. So we're trying to be a bit more transparent with it. But for me, it's as few stages as possible where, you're maximizing the opportunity for the candidate to sell themselves and obviously learn a lot about the role and the company and what the expectations are. But for us to be able to, see if that synergy is there. But there's still loads I'd like to change on it. I think from the actual application stuff, since I've come in, we've just tried to automate as much as possible. So when I came in, there was like no automation on the ATS, and things are a bit inconsistent, just, depending how people used it. So we just tried to bring in that consistency as a standard, I guess, as little things, if a candidate's not successful application, granted, it'll be an automated email, but at least they get something, and not nothing at all and go into the abyss or, whatever that may be. So automate as much and make it as short and slick process as possible is my personal view. And when you apply, you're not refilling your CV in a bloody
Regurgitating.
form.
Hate that
Yeah,
shit. It's just
just add a
awful.
CV or your LinkedIn profile as a PDF or whatever it is. That's grand.
Yeah. And then let technology do the work, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
If you upload a CV, you should easily be able to use technology to find the information that's relevant to you. But and I think that
exactly. And
another
depending on your talent team size as well, what your limitations are in terms of how much you can do. So if you're lucky enough to have 50 recruiters hiring 500 roles a year, then you can probably ring every candidate that applies, can't you? Because you've got so much resource there. But when you don't, if you're if there's a handful of you and you're still hiring up to 1,000 roles a year, and then you've got all the applications on top of that, it's how do you give the best candidate experience, possibly the human touch at the right places, but then using technology to remove a lot of the I would say the admin side of it. So then as a recruiter, you can actually spend time doing the right things of reaching out and speaking to candidates and sitting with hiring managers and doing all the value add stuff and remove as much admin tasks or whatever as possible.
Agreed.
So yeah.
Well, and I think coming back to the earlier point of like elevating a talent professional's role within a business, like to me, the idea of just having somebody there just doing telephone interviews all the time with lots of candidates and they, let's be brutal, most of the time you would just spend dialing numbers that nobody would answer, right? And if that's your job, you're never going to be a proactive, strategic, talent individual. And the role of technology is not to replace that person. It's to get that person to the right people at the right time to then have them invest, their time actually speaking to those people, telling them what it's really like and getting them through the process in the most meaningful way, capturing the data, understanding what good and bad looks like, looking at previous hire, all of that stuff that can be enabled by technology as opposed to substituted out, right? We talk about being a supplementary technology as opposed to a substitution for your effort, basically, or your person.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at where we've used, if I look at when I've used Willow, because obviously I'm never hands on, so I try not to be hands on with it where possible. But we've used Willow really successfully on some graduate campaigns where it's a short window, where you're getting a lot of applications coming in, a lot of that inbound applications, and then you're trying to do a really quick turnaround to that next stage. And we've used Willow for that, and it's great because we could get, I think the way we did it is we just got about 6 of us together and just booked out a day in the office together, buy a load of snacks and stuff, and almost made a bit of a event out of it when it was like reviewing, everything that had come through. So we could turn stuff around really quickly, but it was like low time for us compared to if we were trying to book calls in, keep consistency, if there was loads of us doing them, to make sure we're all consistent and fair.
Yeah.
And to your point, people don't answer or can't do that day, and you're just going on and on, aren't you? So it worked really well for us. And even offering, well, if you don't want to use this platform, you can speak to a human, right? Offer that alternative. Yeah. I don't think anyone did, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
Everyone went through, used the technology in the platform, which was great.
Well, especially from a graduate perspective, most of them are asynchronous individuals already because, email is an asynchronous form of communication, and that is old school. It's WhatsApp, it's voice notes, it's Snapchat, etc. So the way that you're asking them to interview is the way that they tend to speak to their friends and family, etc. Anyway, so it kind of makes sense, and it's just more flexible for anybody. So
tell my age now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I still live in my emails, and people are like, "What are you doing? Just WhatsApp them?" I'm like, "I can't WhatsApp a client. Are you mental?"
We'll be at the egg together, mate.
Yeah. Well, as long as we can email each other.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll be fine. Talking about technology, then, I know that we said we were going to try and steer clear of it, but there's no point. So, AI in both sides of the equation. What's your take, stand, whatever you want to call it, on the state of AI's influence on the recruitment world right now?
Ooh, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think any sort of technological advancement, and then there's an opportunity to use it as an end user, we all get very excited, don't we? And then I think we all look at it and go, how much can this fix, and what can it be used for? I think there's a lot of opportunities for it, but then you've also got to consider the drawbacks of it, right? So if you're thinking, and I'm no expert, so I'm sure people will correct me on this, but if you were trying to write a advert, using ChatGPT, it's from my understanding, it's just pulling all that data that's out there, right? So you're probably just going to get a generic advert back. So it's going to, it will help maybe form a bit of a baseline, but it's not going to be groundbreaking. It's not going to be, it's not going to win against if someone's got true copywriting skills and can look at things differently. So I think there's stuff like that where it can be an aid, like a job description maybe, right? Because it just sits in the back and no one ever reads it anyway, do they? It could be useful. And I've used it. It's useful for prompts, if you're running out of things. But then there'll be loads of other benefits that I won't think of or won't know of where you truly can, leverage it. Like, maybe looking at using it to help with, grammar, or looking at the language you've used, and is it gender neutral language you've used, or things like that. So I think it's one of those. There's just lots you can play around with it, but is it going to solve a massive problem that we've all faced overnight? I don't think so. I think, like with all technology, it just continues to evolve, and you find where the benefits are to something, don't you? And I guess even then you continue to iterate with it, don't you?
What about from a candidate perspective? Like, how concerned are you that the applications that are coming through are, you know, somebody's gone to ChatGPT, asked it the question that you've asked, and regurgitated it into your
I
application
mean,
process.
we've all done something like that before. Remember the days where I guess for generations where we didn't have Google to ask things to, or we're still on dial-up and couldn't find an answer out quick enough because as soon as you're connected, someone picked up the house phone and cut your connection off.
That was it.
You
You're
you
out.
used to go and speak to people, didn't you? Or you'd go to a library and pick up books and
How else
research.
do you get knowledge?
Yeah, and then
Search for it.
You'd regurgitate that in an interview, right? It's in a way, to me, it's no different. I think there's then comes down to the competence of the people interviewing. It's like that probing bit, isn't it? I could regurgitate a tech answer if I learned it, but if you ask me to go deeper into that or something further, I'm probably going to become stuck, aren't I? So I don't think it's cheating. I think that's just researching. Personally, it's just a different way to do it. Just as books evolved to just Googling things online, right?
Well, the point I keep making on that side of the argument is like, okay, so we're all agreed that AI is like here, right? And we're all agreed that there are some aspects that AI can help improve. And what you're saying is you don't want to employ somebody that made you think that they were excellent because they utilized the tool of the future, now. So let me just really translate that. What you're saying is you don't believe in the tool of the future because you're unwilling to employ somebody that can apply it in an effective manner right now, right? That's what you're saying. So it's a double-edged sword, really, because what you don't want is you don't want AI just assessing AI and outcomes generic candidate A, B, C, and D or whatever.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? It's just researching. It's just like you or I going and reading some books on something, and then because that question's coming up around it. To me, it's no different asking that in ChatGPT to Googling it to picking up a book. Right? It's to your point.
Well, we all do it in our jobs anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like interviews aren't there to trip people up. Your interview's there to obviously sell your opportunity and get the candidate excited, but for them to showcase their skills and experience and aptitude and willingness to learn, that's displaying that, isn't it? It might be funny if you give everyone a presentation task and they all type in and come back with the same deck. That'd be quite amusing.
Well, I know people I know people that has happened with already.
Oh, really?
but then again, you're just like, well done. You've put this, and I know what you've done here. So I'm either interested and I'm going to give you a call, or I'm not. Or you go, okay, well, this is the one deck that looks the same as all the others, but actually has additional substance to it, having read through it, or whatever it is. Like, you just got to engage your brain and really think about it. And, I think the interesting thing with AI that's caused all of the fuss, really, is just it's a new technology that everybody is pulling on the moral strings of the argument, if that makes sense. Like, should we ethically be using this to assess individuals? And actually, for us, we don't believe that AI should make any decisions on hiring. We think that AI should give you the information you need to make a decision, like summarize what somebody said in a palatable and easy to read way, for example. But the decision should sit with the person. But people are getting so hung up on that sort of moral, debate about how it should work. Like, if somebody's copied and pasted it, they've copied and pasted it. I copied and pasted my CV from my brother's.
They've done research, haven't they? That's the thing. And again, it's how do you take that conversation further, right? So someone may have looked stuff up to be able to answer some certain questions, but then you might keep that conversation going around that, and you can really understand their aptitude for learning or their interest in it. Some might have researched more, others might not have. So it shouldn't be used against people, should it? That's the thing. It's there, people are going to use it. I think the question then is what are you trying to understand about the candidate through your process? Because if that's what you're worried about, are you asking the right things, or what are you truly trying to get to?
So true. So I guess the tip there really is, like, if you suspect somebody is using ChatGPT or AI, which they probably are, by the way, just dig a little deeper, because if somebody has sent that application a week and a half ago before your face-to-face interview and they've assimilated that information and can articulately tell you back what it means, and then when you dig deeper, they've managed to figure out the answer to that question too. They've either learnt it, which means they've got huge cognitive capability and potential, or they knew it already and they just used it to format it in a more structured way, or whatever. Like, that's the key, is asking the questions that dig a little deeper. We're going to round off now, if that's okay, unless there's anything else you want to say about AI, Sean. But to kind of conclude the podcast, what I always like to do is just ask for like 2 or 3 bits of advice that you'd either give to a candidate or to a recruiter, based on things that you're seeing right now and things that people are worried about, maybe things you've seen in TTC being talked about in any of their channels. Like, is there any great advice or tips that you can give to a recruiter or a candidate right now?
Ooh. I don't know if I ever have any great advice, Woody. I think
it's very humble of you.
Don't know, humble, self-deprecating, could be both. I think one thing for me was when I joined here was that sort of automate, like, and what we discussed about before. Technology is your friend. So if you're joining somewhere new, and that's always the best time, isn't it? When you're somewhere new, because you can understand how things work and look for opportunities to improve things. Often that are already paid for in whatever you're using as well. More often than not, but we'll automate and integrate. I think we lacked a lot of that, and then that became a huge time saver, but also has a big impact on your candidate experience, which in turn has an impact on your brand. So I think for recruiters going somewhere new, look at that process you're going through as a candidate, and when you join, look for those opportunities to improve. Because I think if you don't do them when you go in somewhere, you just sort of fall into whatever's been done and how it's done. I think as a candidate, if you're using AI and ChatGPT, do a little extra reading, show off on top of that. But yeah, I personally wouldn't be adverse to seeing people use that. To your point, Woody, I think that's quite smart, isn't it? I don't know, a quick way, but sometimes delve in a little bit further if something comes back on whatever you're researching that's really interesting. Have a little further read elsewhere. I think when it comes to employer brand, the big learning for us was just that authenticity. We've got a good brand behind us, like you mentioned before, Woody. We've got you've got tech and you've got retail and customer care. So you kind of end up with like mini brands within your brand, don't you? In terms of what people do in the journey. So I think just authenticity on that. So I think that really does work. It certainly seems to have worked for us so far, just being true to where we are and where we're going, and people either want to join you or not at that point. Yeah, there's some ramblings, literal ramblings.
That's good advice. Be authentic. If you're going to use ChatGPT, make sure you learn whatever you ChatGPT'd.
Or at least just learn more than the exact words is probably what I would say.
Yeah. Don't just write it down in your notepad. You're like, okay, got it. And I really like the advice, like, if you're a TA going to a new organization, just remember what it felt like to be a candidate and, what could be improved, what are the marginal gains as you go through that process. How did the automation feel that was there? How did it feel? Or what could save time if it had been there? So yeah, really great advice, Sean. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having
the podcast. You're very welcome. I appreciate it. We've also run over our scheduled time. So I'm sorry for stealing more of your time.
It's my fault for wearing a creased t-shirt and having to change it. Let's be honest.
yeah, that's fair. But never mind. You're crisp and clean now. So all good. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I hate saying that, but I say it anyway. And yeah, thanks very much. Have a good week, everyone.